everybody. It's Jeff from Ayelet Tours, and since 1986, we've been connecting people to Israel and the Jewish world. We are the official travel partner for Hadassah Missions to Israel. We run trips all over the world under the banner of the Traveling University. We run Jewish singles and Jewish adult tours under the banner of Best Day Adventures. And of course, we run the regular virtual program. This evening, we are in for a treat. This is episode 3 of Scholar-Palooza. Let's see, we started week 1 with Dr. David Mendelsohn, who gave us a history lesson on Greece. We moved last week into current events with Professor Stephen Burke. So we've dealt with history, we've dealt with modern times. I think we're ready for, in the words of Monty Python, and now for something completely different. So we'll get metaphysical tonight. And of course, education is it's always good to get a little bit outside of your comfort zone. So as we delve into exile as a metaphysical reality with Rabbi Menachem Creditor, I am reminded of Kierkegaard, who once wrote that life is lived forward but understood backward. So much like the experience of living as outsiders, our search for meaning often reveals itself only after we have wrestled with the discomfort of not fully belonging. So I am very much looking forward to this evening's presentation. A few reminders before we get going here. Number one, this is a webinar, not a Zoom meeting. That means you at home can sit back, relax, and enjoy the program. You can see us, we cannot see you. It also means you can participate. It is a live program. You can do so by posting your questions in the Q&A function in the Zoom window, and we will get to as many of those as we possibly can after the formal presentation. Finally, this is recorded, so if you would like to share it or just watch it again and again, we will be sending out a link so you can do so afterwards. All right. This evening, we are really pleased to be joined by Rabbi Menachem Creditor, who serves as the Pearl and Ira Meyer Scholar in Residence at UJA Federation New York and was the founder of Rabbis Against Gun Violence. He is an acclaimed author, scholar, and speaker with over 4 million views of his online videos and essays. I assume we're going to double that with this video right here. And he was named by Newsweek as one of the 50 most influential rabbis in America. His numerous books and 6 albums of original music include the global anthem Olam Chesed Yibaneh. I am very honored and pleased to turn it over for this evening's presentation on exile as a metaphysical reality to Rabbi Menachem Creditor.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, everybody. It is such a treat to be with you and to be part of Ayelet's Scholar-Palooza. Never in my wildest dreams was I going to be part of any kind of palooza. I hope you and yours are doing well. And it's important and interesting to note, as Jeff said in his introduction, that since this is a webinar, you can see us and we can't see you. And if we're going to be talking about exile, let's acknowledge that this is not the ideal, though with the technology, thank God, that has been made available, that so many of us became literate with during the pandemic out of necessity, we're able to connect in ways that are just transcendent. The physical location where any one of us might be is only one way of describing where we are. What does where mean, after all, when wherever you are, you're in my room, you're in my office, and wherever you are, I'm there. One of the strange intimacies that became real through Zoom is that all of us in our private space had a camera that if we were brave enough to show our face, we also were revealing parts of our inner life. The outside became in, the inside became out. And so as we think about Galut, I hope that you won't get lost in the esoterica that does come into the topic, but that you'll see this as a conversation that relates directly to the human experience. Another way of saying this is, how close are we to each other right now? My hope is that we feel present to each other. I miss seeing your face, though I don't know really who's here. What a strange thing it is to connect in such an intimate way, what learning is really supposed to be, especially in a Jewish framework, without seeing each other. In fact, the encounter between two others, a dialogical connection, an encounter, is what Martin Buber said was the ultimate connection with God. You can't count on it. You can't even reach for it. But if we're available to each other, that's when we're not alone. Exile, in another way of speaking, is aloneness. And not the taking space for myself kind of aloneness, but loneliness. The first realization of God, as it were, in the Bible, in the Torah, is Lo tov hayot adam levado. It's not good for people to be alone. In fact, God might not want people to be alone because God might have learned what it was to be alone, which is why there's anything else other than God. If God is all things, why does there need to be anything else unless there's a divine stirring for companionship, for something else, even if that something else might sometimes say no? Trust me, I'm a father. If my goal in having children and really wanting children was to have other beings that look a little bit like me, who would always say yes, well, I was doomed to failure. The real joy is in coming to know another. No matter how close you are, there's always a closeness that you can reach for. And so, through today's exploration of exile as a metaphysical reality, there will be some interesting and out there thoughts. But deep down, it's really all about the connection we have. And in the spirit of everything I just said, I hope that through this teaching, I will be in some ways available to you. We don't yet know each other. That would have been true if we were in a room together. I hope that we will come to know each other in one way or another. All of us images of God, a little bit more of the fractal present when we can be together. May we be blessed to be a little bit more together. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you'll be able to see my face in the corner of your screen. And let's get started. This is part of Scholar-Palooza. I just want to keep on saying it because it's fun to say. This is exile as a metaphysical reality, living as outsiders looking in. The first text might surprise you, but when I did a Google search for the word exile and its definition, an image came up of a sticker that people put on their water bottles. And it turns out, as you'll see in the bottom left of your screen, that this is an excerpt of the lyrics of the song Exile by Taylor Swift. When I told my kids I was starting with Taylor Swift, they were very proud of me. And so even if it wasn't going to make the final cut, my children's pride meant that I had to start here. It's a beautiful song. I really recommend it highly. The words are, you were my town. Now I'm in exile, seeing you out. I think I've seen this film before, so I'm leaving out the side door. And I know that I see things with rabbinic eyes. No lyric is safe from the interpretive process of spiritual seekers. So these lyrics call to me, and I want to treat them like text just for a moment, and then we'll move forward. You were my town. You, the personalization of a place. We do this as Jews Friday nights with Lechadodi, the singing of a song to the city of Jerusalem. And Jerusalem, like the exiled bride, but on Shabbat, who returns. So whatever town this was, Taylor Swift is writing to it as another, an anthropomorphized place. You were my town, which means no longer. Now I'm in exile. So what does that mean? Seeing you out. I don't see you in. I think I've seen this film before, which means our relationship has gone farther away and nearer. And in fact, a theme of Taylor Swift's music, which is exceedingly popular, and some of it is radically beautiful, all powerful. She says many things about relationships. In fact, she became famous for saying things about her relationships. So she's been here before. She's experienced what we would consider, at least she wants us to consider, exile. So this time she's leaving out the side door, not the front door, not the back door, a little bit less painful because she's been there before. And speaking as a rabbi, Jewish history has been full of moments that feel like cyclical exiles. In fact, an Ashkenazi version of this is at the very end of the very famous film adaptation of Fiddler on the Roof, where the residents of a town called Anatevka place their satchels on their back and are on the move again, the wandering Jews. And so when we think about the term exile, especially through a Jewish framework, it is important for us to hold the recognition that this is not esoteric, it's not removed. Please God, it isn't the current reality for many of us, but it might be the spiritual reality even for those of us who are blessed to have a home or to be in the Jewish homeland. Exile is physical and emotional. That's where we begin. So moving into the next text, I decided to say with a theme of country singers, women country singers who are just so great to listen to. They get to the core of things sometimes. This is a song called On the Outside Looking In. It's on my favorite playlist by Alison Krauss. She's the recording artist. It was co-written by Tim O'Brien. And here's the lyric. You close the door in front of me. I wait patiently outside. Right? So there's another person or entity closing the door. I'm waiting patiently outside. And as the minutes tick away, I feel my anger rise. So the emotional reality of being in exile, it's not a surrender moment, not for this person. It's angry. Who's the object of my rage? Who's not being fair? Meaning, whose fault is it that I'm out here? And you're going to see, we're going to get to Jewish texts very quickly that point to these questions and radical suggestions. Is it you for your indifference, right? You left me out here in the cold, or is it my fault for just standing there? Who's to blame? Because in my mind, the room beyond, right, what is not exile, what is the opposite of exile, we can call it redemption, we can call it home, intimacy, is bathed in golden light. I dream about you through the day and I toss and turn at night. Sometimes it's hard, I want to sing it with a twang. Sometimes it's hard to understand when they say that pride's a sin. Should I go or should I stay on the outside looking in? All right, I gave it, I had to sing a little bit. The singer, the author, the speaker here is standing on the outside where they don't want to be, and they can't figure out who's to blame, and now they're paralyzed. Should I stay outside looking in? Should I go? Should I just let go of the dream of ever returning? And in fact, what is the place to which this person imagines returning? Look at the first line of the second stanza. In my mind, the room beyond is bathed in golden light. Well, is it really bathed in golden light? Or is it in my mind that it's bathed in golden light? How do I know what the reality of the lost home truly is? We say at the end of the book of Lamentations, when we mark the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem, it's the book of Echa, the Hebrew lines we also say when we put away the Torah, Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva. Return us, God, and we will return. Chadesh Yameinu kekedem. Return our days as of old. But let me ask you a question, really. What days of old would you actually choose to return to? Were they really that good? Were the glory days really that glorious? And in fact, if it was glorious for you, was it glorious for everybody? Or did it inevitably leave somebody behind? Have we ever gotten to the place where things are, as the third line of the first verse says, where things are fair? Because it's not fair to live in exile. Why should anyone be forced to do that? And yes, that is a geopolitical question. Yes, specifically within the Jewish community, that is an eternal question that was answered on a physical and metaphysical level with the rebirth of our home in 1948 in the state of Israel. But there is a religious posture, even within the Jewish community, however fringe it is, that just because you're in the physical place that was the ancestral homeland does not mean redemption has come. That was a human move. So who's to blame and who can do something about it are big questions for us to think about. Now, we're going to leave country music behind. My apologies. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a sweet way to begin a conversation that, just like country music, points to the pain and the simplicity of the heart's yearning. So we're going to go to Torah and to an ancient midrash. This is one of my favorites. It's not because it's a gentle or pleasant text, but because you see what the rabbis are trying to do, or I hope you will. The verse at the top of your screen, Noach drank of the wine and became drunk, and he was exposed inside his tent. This happens after the flood, when the ark lands on Mount Ararat, and Noach emerges, and the first thing he does is plant a vineyard, and it seems like it's that rapid growth of vegetation that you see in film sometimes. The vines grew, the grapes grew, and he made wine immediately. And when he drank of the wine, he became drunk. And we don't quite know what this word means. He was exposed inside his tent. Now, we don't know what it means, but that doesn't keep the rabbis. Look at your bottom left. So you can see that this is from Breshit Rabbah, an ancient rabbinic text from around the year 200 CE, from exploring what it could have meant. And I'll ask you to go with me for a second into a textual analysis. But remember, the rabbis who are writing this are living in the aftermath of the destruction of the temple in 70 CE. They're in their own exile, no matter where they find themselves. God's home burnt down. The way of connecting to God, the sacrifices, is gone. We don't have the intimacy the way we used to. Maybe we have new kinds of intimacy, but the rabbis are struggling, and they look to biblical models and they project worry and hope. Look what we see. Rabbi Chia bar Abba said, on that same day he planted the vineyard, on that same day he drank, on that same day he was disgraced. How is it possible that all of these things happened at the same time? This is what Doctor Who says is timey-wimey. It doesn't quite follow linearly, one thing after the other. But it comes to teach that you can fall fast and hard. And then the exploration of this specific verse. You see in the Hebrew above, I put some of the text in yellow, Vayit Gal, and the Hebrew here is, and he was exposed. Galui means revealed. So look at what the rabbis do with this verse. Vayigal, revealed, is not written, but rather Vayit Gal. He brought about, and this is a new word for our conversation, exile, galut, like the word Vayit Gal, it sounds just like that, for himself and for subsequent generations. How did he do that? How did he bring exile? He was the one who saved us all. Noach, he's the survivor. Well, it says the 10 tribes were exiled only due to wine, meaning excess, drinking too much. This is what was written regarding them, those who drink wine from bowls. Woe to those who rise early in the morning and pursue intoxicating drink, who stay up late at night, wine will inflame. Verses from Amos and from Isaiah, two biblical texts in the prophets. The other two tribes, Judah and Benjamin, were also exiled, only due to wine, as it is stated. These too erred with wine and strayed with intoxicating drink. Now, I don't want to focus on the alcohol content here. I want to point out that the rabbis are saying that exile happens as a response to sin. Exile is a punishment. Exile is not what the divine wants, and it's not an accident. It's a form of justice. Whatever you and I think about the notion of exile, even if we don't use the word, we might use the word diaspora. In Hebrew, the difference between galut and tfutzot, exile and diaspora, is significant, as is the emotional impact for us. But what I want us to think about just for a moment, and I'll take the text away, and then I'll put it back on so we can have a break from it, is whose fault, who's to blame, as the Alison Krauss song said. Who's to blame for exile? If I can't be home, I have to make sense of the world. Why is it so? And so what I hope we'll do is continue thinking about this in real terms, in personal terms. I think my screen hid what we were looking at. And there it is again. Good. So moving on from this text to the next, a shorter text from a little bit later in time. This is also after the destruction of the temple. And I'll ask you to open your hearts to what the text is saying, no matter what you believe about God. If there's a God, and how do you believe in God, and what kind of God? Let's leave all of that for another conversation. But Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel, right, Isaac the son of Samuel, said in the name of another rabbi, whose name was simply Rabbi, The night consists of 3 watches, meaning 3 separate periods of time, and over each and every watch, the Holy Blessed One sits and roars like a lion and says, "Woe to me, that due to their sins I destroyed my house, burned my temple, and exiled them among the nations of the world." Now, again, this depiction of God might seem radical to some. The emotionality of God, the pain of God, but this depiction, the rabbis, in their imaginative assertions, because there's no proof for any of this, obviously, even if you consider the Bible proof, this is not Bible. How do we know God's emotional response to the human pain of dispersion? Well, maybe it's a projection, maybe it's love, maybe it's intuition, maybe it's wishful thinking. But the rabbis say that our exile causes God pain and that God feels the pain of having had to punish us through exile because of sin. We can deal again with the theology of this, the worthiness of it, the reactivity of it. But I want to emphasize just for our conversation that God feels pain in this text because we are far away from each other. And I want you to follow that into this next text. It's very interesting. This is a mystic whose name was Rabbi Shlomo HaKohen Rabinowitz in a book called Tiferet Shlomo. It's a classic in Hasidic learning. And it's not only an exile of place, it's an exile of time. Shabbat as a hint of the way things could be, meaning the end of exile. Shabbat is where things are closer to how they should be. Look at what Rabbi Rabinowitz writes. When Shabbat comes, it brings more joy to God than when the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, stood. Why? Because on Shabbat, there's a yichud, a reuniting in heaven, even during times of exile. And during the days of the week, God is in exile. As it says, Imo anochi v'tzara, I am with him in his pain. The rabbis make a move here that says something fascinating, that God followed the Jews into exile. God went into exile too. So, paragraph 2, when Shabbat comes, there's a great joy because God leaves exile and there is a union. In the times of the temple, there was a union during the week, and on Shabbat it was a higher level, but as a result, it wasn't as joyous to God, meaning because of the great contrast between exile and union, God is happier since we're in exile to feel the joy of Shabbat with us. Again, take this however you wish, but there's a sweetness to it too. Yes, it is painful to be in this moment of history, says Rabbi Rabinowitz, and maybe some of us. But isn't it beautiful when things are good? Doesn't the good feel so much better because of what we know the alternative feels like? Watch. Now, some of us will be traveling to Prague this summer. I'm thrilled to be leading a study mission, a study tour with Ayelet to Nuremberg, Berlin, and Prague. This is a text from the Maharal of Prague, the famous Rabbi Judah Loew, who, according to legend, created the golem, right? We're not going to do the entire thing, but this book of his, the Netzach Yisrael, the Eternity of Israel, is all about exile. And I've highlighted one sentence from each slide. So we're not going to do the whole thing. But I want to point to this, that the knowledge of all things is acquired from their opposite. How do I know what redemption will feel like? Well, it's because I know what the opposite feels like. Only because true praise can only be recognized in the middle from its opposite. Therefore, we cannot explain the concept of the final redemption, Geulah, without explaining the concept of galut and destruction. So for all of the tribulations that we might feel in history, they are what teaches us what to dream about. The absence of love is what makes us yearn for love. But there's another reason. I'm skipping around a little bit moving forward through the Maharal's texts. Anything which departs, you see the underlined part, from its natural place, which is outside its place, is unable to stay in the place which is not natural for it, which means if you have a home, if you have a place where you're supposed to be, if you're not there, it just feels wrong. Rather, they need to return to their natural place. Exile is unnatural. You yearn for the home, for the connectivity, for where feels right. Sometimes when you're looking for a new home and you walk into the place and you just get a feeling, that is what this is about. And it is impossible, the last underlined sentence, for the unnatural to become natural. A metaphor, the last section after the underline, it's like trying to force fire to stay down when its natural state is to rise. Or like trying to hold up solid matter when its natural state is to fall to earth. If you could achieve that, you would be making the unnatural natural. And his concern here is about the people of Israel. The Jewish exile is an unnatural reality, and we can't, as Jews, become permanently outside of our home. His concern in Prague in 15 something, 1512 to 1609, we believe, is his lifespan. He was worried about the permanent dispersion of the Jewish people. And he says something very beautiful in this one. The underlined part says, one thing is not divided. So since this is so sweet, it's not true at all, but it's so nice. Since the Jewish nation is a nation united more than any other nation, he clearly never sat in on board meetings at shuls. All right, so trust me, this is sweet and wishful. It is appropriate that they should be gathered together. From this, we can see that dispersal, the delineation, the division, the exile between people is particularly unnatural for them. It's impossible to say that this state of affairs is only because of sin and iniquity. Don't blame this on yourself. You cannot have made this wrong thing no matter how much wrong you did. After all, the dispersal of people of Israel is so natural because if this were to become permanent, the unnatural would become natural. And follow me, one final point he makes, because he says not only is it important for the Jewish people to be home and to be under their own self-determining recognizance, he says too here, and this is amazing to read a rabbi from his time saying, in the case of the rest of the nations, according to the order of existence, it is appropriate that each one of them, from the point of view of being created for its own purpose, should not be under the authority of others, which means it is natural to be home. It is natural to be whole. It is natural to be responsible for yourself, and anything else is a reversal of creation. It's an amazing suggestion. Now, moving forward and coming to somewhat of a close, there is a very, very powerful analysis of the life of Moses written by a wonderful living scholar, Dr. Viva Gottlieb Zornberg. In her book, Moses, A Human Life, she writes this about exile and Moses' stutter. You might remember that he protests, I can't, to God, and I can't speak well. I have uncircumcised lips, he says, Anochi arel svatayim. So Dr. Zornberg says, from the Kabbalistic, meaning the mystical perspective, Moses' speechlessness is viewed as case in point of more general malaise, galut hadibur, the exile of the word, which is the condition of Mitzrayim, it's the Hebrew word for Egypt, with its harmonics of tsara, trouble, metzar, narrow, tsirim, birth contractions. On all levels, she writes, from the metaphysical to the brutally physical, the Israelites must be redeemed from a death grip that chokes their expressive life, which means not only have we been talking about physical exile, interpersonal exile, peoplehood exile, communal exile, it is also true that I can be in exile for my own creative expression. It can go that deep, to be in exile from yourself. Now, here's something sweet. I'm going to tell you a little story. This is a story recorded by Robert Fulghum. You might know him. He wrote Everything I Really Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. It's one of the sweetest books ever written. I really, really love it. And he talks about how his mother's maiden name was Howard. And he would say the Lord's Prayer. His family was a group of ministers. He himself became a Unitarian minister. So his mother's maiden name was Howard, and they would say the Lord's Prayer, but he misheard it when he learned it. You probably know the language, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. But he misheard it, and he thought he heard, and so he prayed for a very long time, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. What an amazing thing it is, he says. I have to get the screen back. Good luck to me. I'm going to share it with you one more time. This is where he closes after that sweet story of having misheard his own name. And I thought it for so long that the prayer was about his mother and his mother's family, that even when I passed through all those growing up stages of skepticism, disbelief, revision, and confusion, maybe along the lines of what we've been calling exile, somewhere in my mind, I still believed in Howard, because at the heart of that childhood image, there is no alienation. I belong to the whole big scheme of things. I lived and worked and had my being in the family store. And I didn't want to end on this text. I wanted to give a Jewish text, not for the ultimate answer of exile, but actually to give us a sign of hope. This is one of my favorite texts in the entire Talmud. It's from Baba Batra 99a. You know, the cherubs, the Kruvim, were not the darling dandies of Raphael and Michelangelo. The cherubs were fierce, dragon, eagle, human figures that stood right above the tablets of the covenant in the Holy Temple. And according to mysticism, look at the text here, when the people of Israel rebelled against the divine will, the cherubs, the Kruvim, would turn away from each other. They were animated. They would look away. When Israel acted faithfully, they would face each other. I want to say it again. When the people of Israel rebelled, meaning when things were wrong, again, a kind of exile. Sinning is not a language that we use very often, but when things go wrong, and that can be true just between two people, not in the most ritual of ways, but in a very human way. Exile as a metaphysical reality is that feeling you get when something's gone wrong, when you feel all alone. It is also a physical reality when you don't have access to your own dignity. For all of the complications of today's uh, politics as regards the state of Israel, it is also a state of coming home, the dignity of having a place on earth, just as the Maharal of Prague said, everyone should have. It could have begun right with Noah when he came out of the ark, but something went wrong. It could have gone right so many times in our history. There were times, I suppose, when the cherubs, the angels, would face each other. That was our bellwether that things were going well. We actually use the term Messiah, or in Hebrew, Mashiach, to describe the era when things will be right. Will they be right for everyone, according to our notion, or must someone always be in exile? I'll give you one last teaching, and then we'll invite Jeff back. We'll talk a little bit. One of the most complicated and sweet stories I've ever heard. Obviously, it's not real, so don't worry. This didn't really happen. There was a guy in a town. He worked his whole life and then he retired. And people really worried about him. You know, people who've retired, some of them have a plan, some of them don't. It's kind of hard to figure out what's next. I know plenty of people in my life who have faced such things. So the town was worried and they decided, let's give this guy a job. So they hired him for hourly wages to sit at the eastern edge of town and wait for the Messiah. He sat and he waited And the next day he quit. They say, "Why did you quit?" He said, "This is exhausting." Because when you're in exile and you feel that pain, and according to the mystics, when God feels it too, it is so hard to know that things could be better. A mystic, after all, has an inkling of the way the world ought to be, is in severe pain because it just isn't the way it ought to be. And then they commit their life to raising the world up just an inch closer to how it ought to be, knowing it probably won't work. But exile is a motivating factor because it's not supposed to be this way. The natural order is every being is supposed to have its place. Every emotion is supposed to have its time. Everyone deserves the dignity of home. And so I say so not only for Bnei Israel, for the Jewish people, but for Bnei Adam, for every image of God that is just as deserving as its own rightful place as my family. How amazing to read voices from the past who experienced dislocation after dislocation and the ensuing emotional, existential, mystical, and religious dislocation, who were still able to envision something better, no matter how exhausting it was. May we be blessed. May we really deeply be blessed. May the whole world be blessed to be at home, to be whole, to be safe, and for the exile in all of these dimensions to one day very soon end. It's good to learn with all of you. Really a delight. I welcome Jeff back to take us forward into conversation.
Rabbi Creditor, thank you for taking us through that presentation. I've got to say I'm still tickled a little bit by Howard be thy name. I actually remember reading that years and years ago.
Oh, wow.
That's it always reminds me of the Jimi Hendrix lyric. You know the most famous misheard lyric of all time is
Excuse
the
me.
"Excuse me while I kiss this guy."
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's a great book. I've seen the book. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. It's always a fun one. All right, everybody out there, if you have questions, if you have things that we'd like to address with Rabbi Creditor, you can post them in the Q&A. We'll get to as many as we can. Before we do that, I just want to share my screen one more time and let people know, remind people that Rabbi Creditor, as he mentioned, will be leading a tour with us next summer to Nuremberg, Prague, and Berlin. So it's Germany and the Czech Republic. So you can, of course, find all of the details on our website, ayelet.com. Book by December 1st, and there is a very significant discount, as is listed right there. That is one of the many amazing options that we have coming up for you in the year ahead. My goodness, if you cannot find a trip to somewhere that you're interested in on our website, then I'm not sure where it is you're looking to go, because my goodness, we've got a trip to Lithuania and Latvia with Professor Yael Strom. We've got an Iceland trip with Donny Rothstein, a filmmaker from Mallorca, who's amazing. He's going to be going to Iceland. We've got an Italy trip coming up with Mark Michael Epstein. My goodness, Greece, India. We've got really incredible adventures all over the world. The American Conference of Cantors is leading a trip to Argentina this coming February. If that's not enough, we've got a cruise going to the Arctic Circle. The Arctic Circle, for goodness sakes, there really is an option for everyone. So I encourage you to check out all of the options on our website, ayelet.com, and reach out to us. Let us know if you have any questions. Rabbi Creditor, I should mention, I didn't mention before, that in addition to the tour that you're leading with us next summer, you just got back, I think maybe a week ago, from leading an interfaith clergy trip for us to Israel from the Westchester area. So you're just back. Welcome back. I'm glad you went and came back safely. And of course, we are all, well, I think most of us are probably heartened by the news today of ceasefire in the north, and hopefully it's leading towards a more peaceful period. Because, of course, as you have seen many times over the last year, these are challenging times in Israel.
Yes.
So
God, it should be a sign of things getting a little bit calmer. Maybe people being able, especially in the north of Israel, to go home. They have
May it be. Really,
yeah,
may it be.
80,000 people should go home.
All right, so we've got a couple requests in here. One from Rosa Borg, who writes, let me see. One of the reasons I've been looking forward to this is because since the 7th, October 7th, I've felt like an alien in my own country. So I was curious to hear what you'd say. What you said about exile being a consequence of sin/evil makes perfect sense, and I find the thought of Hashem accompanying us both in our exile and in our joy so comforting. Thank you for providing this homely space where we can face and see each other at least for a while. Not a question, just a
No,
statement. Very nice
no,
statement.
but very sweet. And Rosa, I just want to say that the comfort of that, and I'm glad it was comforting, it's not only comforting, right? People can feel so many different ways about trying to bring God into the real lived experience, especially when there's pain. So, one of the interesting things that the rabbis do when they forcefully, really assertively bring God into exile with us, or describe God having done it, um, is they help us feel not less vulnerable, but not alone in our vulnerability. They bring vulnerability into a definition of God, which is very radical and very comforting to not be alone as we go through life. That is something very big.
So I've got a question for you on one of the texts that you mentioned earlier. I think it was the Talmud Bavli that you were talking about. Uh, the quote mentioned that there were three watches over the course of the night, but it
Yes.
doesn't really go into what that is. And I know that's outside of your talk and expertise, but I'm just curious if you have any. Is there any discussion of what are those three watches? What are the three time periods within the night?
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting thing. So in Masechet Brachot, the Tractate of Blessing, the very first book of the Talmud, there is a lot of conflating what happens in the human sphere with what happens on the heavenly sphere. So this is a good example. The watches were actually guard shifts for the priests at the high temple. But because there is no temple by the time the Talmud is written, 600 CE, they use the same term to describe sort of like if you're looking at a sundial, the way that the shadows move or divide the night up into sections, because we have to have access to heaven. Well, we used to do that by having the nexus of Jerusalem and the sacrifices. When we don't have the sacrifices, we have the stories of the people. And then we have to figure out, well, we don't have that intermediary anymore. Maybe we can imagine what God is doing since we can't activate our connection with God. Basically, what I'm saying is that in the periods of exile that happened through Jewish history, be it the expulsion from Spain, be it the expulsion from England, which many people forget, Portugal. I mean, I can really just name every country and just have to figure out when. Even Ulysses Grant temporarily signed an expulsion edict of the Jews from
Yeah.
the Union, which was rescinded very quickly, but still happened in history. Um, those moments, and now let me add a less anti-Jewish version of this. Those moments and terrible things like the pandemic force us into a response mode. It can shut us down. Exile can certainly do that. And so many of us, when we were forced to, I'm doing it with my body, forced to stay home, felt felt alone. In fact, it was the least Jewish experience. There I was as a guest cantor for a synagogue in New Jersey, praying on Zoom, leading Kol Nidre on Zoom to a room of people with no harmonies. Talk about Aviva Zornberg's notion of exile of expression. Wow, where did harmony go? So, in response to all of this, we, I think, we're not the only people, but Jews have often been creative in response to devastation. Mysticism bloomed after the expulsion from Spain because we had to understand how such a thing could happen if there is a God in the world. So we created new ways of understanding, new ways of singing and praying, new ways of connecting. We basically said, a pox on exile, human agency can bridge even that divide.
And the modern day parallel to the Spanish exile leading to the to mysticism kind of blooming is COVID leading to, even if it's not the same as being connected in person, these opportunities where we can all connect technologically much more frequently and easily than we otherwise were able to do, as we are sitting here on Zoom right now. All right, a couple more questions. We'll start to wrap up. David Goldstein asks a very interesting question. Does the unity on Shabbat that you mentioned have anything to do with the double mitzvah on Shabbat?
So David Goldstein, you make me chuckle, and under my beard, I'm blushing. So for those who don't know, the double mitzvah, you could have put it in quotes because it's a euphemism for marital relations during Shabbat. And there is the concept that while it is always a mitzvah to have pleasure, it's one of the best parts of Judaism to not shy away from good experiences. It is especially special to do that on Shabbat. Um, and even though I want to laugh at the question because it's delightful, I also want to answer it seriously because the answer is yes. The concept of zivug, of coupling, is actually a deeply mystical idea because if you follow the Kabbalists, the mystics, and their notion of exile when it comes to God and when it comes to the metaphors of Shabbat, often you hear this formula before a mitzvah, before fulfilling a commandment. L'shem yichud, for the sake of unifying, kud shabrichu u shechinte, the Holy Blessed One and the Holy Blessed One's Shekhinah. In classic Kabbalistic language, that is male and female. It's very complicated. We can deal with a gender disparity another time. But the whole idea of fracture within God is that the maleness is here and the femaleness is there. And Jerusalem, ke'almanah, like a widow, sits alone. And Shabbat, the Shabbat bride, returns on Shabbat. That's why we turn around to welcome her in the name of God. It's a wedding ceremony. And so mysticism points to the reunification of God and often does so in very physical terms. And so I would say this, and I mean it from the core of me to the core of everybody else, that when we come together as friends, or when partners come together in love, even sensual love is included in this, it is a delight to God and it brings sparks back together that is healthy love. It's not the act, it's the connectivity that can be embodied in that act. And when we combine the sweetness of intimacy with the intimacy of Shabbat, how could that not heal even God?
Rabbi Creditor, I've got one more request in the Q&A here. I'll put you on the spot. You can say yes or no. But in light of this being almost Thanksgiving, Peg Elephant writes, could we please have Rabbi Creditor sing Olam Chesed Yibaneh, a fitting prayer song for our times and right before Thanksgiving?
Bag, you're so sweet. I want to say no, but I'm not gonna. The reason why I want to say no is because I'm not sure the sound is going to work on Zoom. So we're going to give it a shot, and it's a nice way to close. So let me give us a blessing, and then we'll sing the song. Okay. So for those who might know the song, you might not know that it was written. I wrote it right after 9/11 for my daughter. We were expecting our first child, and I worried about the world that I was bringing a child into. And so I walked with her right when she was born on my chest up and down Broadway in Manhattan. And the song kind of poured into me, and these three Hebrew words from Psalms just felt like they were the right ones. They brought me out of exile, actually, as it were. And the words are Olam Chesed Yibaneh. Love will build this world. In fact, according to Maimonides, the three words mean nothing I could do would ever make me worthy of this moment or the next. The world is beautiful, as hard as it can be. This night sky that I'm looking at outside my window is spectacular. My friend Jeff, he's so nice. This friendship is nice. You all out there, this is precious. This air I'm breathing, what an unbelievable gift. So, on the one hand, I'm just welling up with gratitude. If you're wondering what to be thankful for this year, you have this year. You have this moment. Don't miss it. The other thing about this song, and I'll just offer it briefly, is we can do something to make things better than the way we've received them. Even the sky can be more beautiful if we incline ourselves to saving it. So let's do our best, welling up with gratitude to pay it forward so that future generations have even more to be thankful for. All right, so I'm going to pick up my guitar, but I'm going to look at Jeff to tell me if the Zoom gods are allowing us to hear it. All right, ready? I'm going to strum. You tell me if you hear it.
The Zoom gods, it's impossible. We were talking about it before. They have used AI to make sure there are no interruptions in the meeting. It's incredible.
All right, so let's do this. Friends, if you Google the words Olam Chesed Yibaneh, hopefully someone did a nice job covering it and you'll hear it. And with that, I am so touched to be part of the program. Jeff, thank you for having me. Everyone, thanks for participating.
Well, Rabbi Creditor, I am grateful to you for taking the time to share with us this evening. Truly appreciate it. I wish you and everybody out there a very happy Thanksgiving. May we all have a lot to be thankful for in the year ahead. And for everybody, as you mentioned, this is a Palooza, Scholar-Palooza. This was episode 3 out of 4, which means we have one more. So we will all be together, same time, same place, same link next week. Until then, I wish you all a good week and shalom.
Bye, everybody.